Welcome to lecture number 4, African Instruments. Before we begin, let's look at some of the general characteristics of African music. In the last lecture, we talked about the San people and the amazing symbiosis they had with the land, with their environment, with their heritage, and how ancient that culture was, and how inventive their music was, and how important it was, and how much it related to their click language. In this lecture, we're going to look at the classifications of instruments in Africa, and I've decided to pick just a few samplings because we have hundreds of choices we could make. But I've picked some that are, I think, highly representative of the different types of instruments used in Africa. The thing about African music is the melodies are usually short and pretty simple. African music uses short bits of a melody that are repeated over and over again. It might be something as simple as ayodade, ayodade, something like that, that's repeated over and over again, but then it's set in layers of rhythm, or it might be sung by one person and echoed by many, or it might be sung by a whole group of people. And the singers or instrumentalists, they may change them at will, so that a performance becomes a theme, the main idea, and then many variations that follow. And one of the things that we do in modern jazz is that very thing. Musical instruments in African societies also serve a variety of roles. Some instruments may be confined only to religious or cultic rituals or to social occasions. And among some peoples, there may be restrictions as to the age, the sex, or social status of the player. And in some parts in the griot culture, the musician is highly regarded, and they have a very high social status and are extensively trained. All sub-Saharan languages, except Swahili, are what are called tone languages. And the meaning of the word depends on the tone or pitch in which they are said. So if I were going to say apples are red in English, I could say it many different ways. Apples are red. Apples are red. And we don't have that particular restriction on tone or pitch, except at the end of a sentence, we sometimes ask a question. If we put the article in front, are apples red? And we might rise in pitch. But these languages have a very definite pitch sound to them, very high and low. And we're going to see that that actually is mimicked with something called talking drums, that they can actually send signals, language signals, with drums, much like we would think of Morse code in our language. And so consequently, instrumental music, or even natural sounds such as bird song, often imitates or suggests meaningful phrases of the spoken language. Well, certain instruments are used only to accompany a singer. And here the interplay between the voice and the instrument is often very intricate and delicately balanced. And this has happened over thousands of years, that the instrumentalists and the vocalists have learned how to work with each other in these wonderful songs. And all the music in Africa has very important roles in society. They can be religious, they can be communicative. That is, they can be like signals they're sending to each other, or having a conversation. They can be purely recreational, just for fun and for relaxation. They might be ceremonial. They might be spiritual, to help someone get into a state that they can be more in tune with nature or the gods or each other or themselves. And this is rather an interesting term. They might be causative. Now what that means is that it's thought that if you sing certain songs, they might make things happen. Now we can see the parallels in our own society today with our music having some very similar characteristics. Africa is the mother of all this music. And whereas we're going to see, Africa is the mother of almost every instrument on the planet. So let's jump into it. Let's start with the African chordophones. I've picked 7 out of the plethora of choices that are available for these instruments. So let's start with the mouth bow. This is probably the oldest string instrument. Now we saw this with the San people, but the mouth bow likely was a bow for hunting small game. But then what one does is put the string in their mouth, as you can see in this picture, and then with a stick in his left hand, you can see, he can literally change the sound of the pitch and then strike the string here, and then make different syllables with ow, ow, ee-oh, ah, in mouth shapes, and it produces a completely different sound. You'll see this on one of the videos. And so it's this long string, usually made with cord or metal, and it can be played with the hands or with a wooden stick or branch. And what I love about this is there's speculation that the hunting bow may have been used as a musical instrument from as early as about 13,000 BC. And this is because of cave paintings and artifacts that have been found. The next one is called a dungu. A dungu is the instrument that's made of a hollowed out slab of wood, and it's covered by two pieces of leather. It's woven together in the center, and it's a stringed musical instrument of the Alur people of northwestern Uganda. And it would remind us of guitars. Now what's interesting is the guitar, all guitars have their origins in Africa. And you can see by this instrument how it resembles a guitar. It has the sound box and a sound hole where my cursor is. And then of course all the strings, and the strings give it different pitches, high or low, depending on the size of the string. Another stringed instrument is the orutu. And it's sometimes known as the African fiddle. And it's a one-stringed fiddle of East Africa. And the orutu, in this case, it has several strings, but usually the one string is then bowed or struck. And we'll see examples of this in the videos as well. And you notice that most of these have a shape like a gourd, like the African harp, the enanga and the kundi. It's a type of arched harp played by the Ganda people of Uganda. And you'll notice its shape, this gourd shape, literally came from a gourd found in nature, dried out, hollowed out, sometimes then varnished or sometimes almost like sanded, so that it has a different shape and then carved into particular shapes, and then highly ornamented. So you can see that this particular African harp looks like a person. And it's just amazing how these harps will sound. And you get to see that in some of the videos. And then many people don't realize that the banjo originated in Africa. Then it was brought to the Caribbean by the African slave trade and by the European slave trade, made its way up into the plantations of the South in the United States, and then got adopted by white people, Anglos in Appalachia and in the South as an accompanying instrument. But the early East African banjos were built around a gourd body, as you can see on the right, and a wooden stick neck. And these instruments had varying numbers of strings, though some often included some form of a drone. Now, a drone is just the same sound that happens over and over and over again while other sounds move around it. And that's true on what's known as a plectrum banjo today, played in bluegrass, with the thumb string. It's one pitch, while the banjo player plays many different pitches with the other fingers and string. So the banjo is African in origin. And then they have something called the belly harp. Now, it's a musical instrument found in West Africa, including Nigeria and Liberia, which is a musical bow with a gourd resonator, which is held against the body. Now, resonator makes the sound louder and makes it deeper depending on the shape. So this gourd you see at the bottom is held against the stomach and the harp is played. These are amazing sounding instruments, and the creativity of these cultures over thousands of years is just phenomenal. And then my favorite stringed instrument is the inanga. And it's played in Burundi by whispering along with playing. the strings. And usually songs tell the story of courageous kings, our way of living and values, as they would say it. And it's kind of the precursor to the zither and, in one sense, precursor to the piano. It's absolutely fantastic instrument and has a beautiful sound, and it's carved out of one piece of wood, and then many strings are laid over the top of it. So those were the chordophones. Now let's look at the idiophones. And I have 5 examples. The first and one of the most famous is the calabash. Now it just looks like a wooden salad bowl to us. But in African music, it's an instrument that consists of half of a large calabash, which is a great big gourd, in which it's struck by the palms, the fingers, or the wrist to produce a variety of different sounds. So on the video that you'll see that you have for Canvas, there's a great demonstration of this. In fact, I think maybe a couple of them. And then the shekere is a really nice gourd that has beads set around it. I have one, a modern version of it in the music room that when you come to class, I'll let you play it. And it's used as a rhythm instrument, and you can get some very, very interesting sounds with it. And once again, it's made of this dried gourd and then using the beads. So the important thing to remember when we talk about different musical instruments, wherever they might be in the world, is the natural resources they have in the environments that they were invented in, whether it was made out of copper or made out of bronze or driftwood. It just depends on the culture and how the people all around the world used the native materials to make instruments for personal expression. Another one, and I love this, is the malimbe and the balafon. They look like types of xylophones, and I can't wait for you to hear the sound of these. They are the precursors to all of our mallet instruments that we play in orchestras and bands in the United States. They were originated in Africa, and you can see that they're made with wood and strung together, but then they have on the bottom of the strings, they look like they're gourds, and those gourds are what's known as resonators. So when you hit the bar, the sound is amplified by the gourd that's underneath it. We still use that system today on modern 21st century xylophones and marimbas and other instruments like that. Then this is one of the most amazing things I have ever seen. It's one of the oldest instruments on the planet. It's called an African rock gong. Now what happens is that the shape of certain types of rock, when the rock is struck, produce a sound that's almost otherworldly. It almost sounds like a bell. And you see all of the markings on this rock. Those are carved out places that were actually struck to make sounds. And so you can hit the rock in different places and make different sounds. There are a couple of videos that you'll be watching that will demonstrate this. And we call this a lithophone. Lith for rock, phone for sound or voice. So a lithophone is a rock instrument. And then one of the most famous instruments out of the African idiophones is the slit drum or log drum. You take a log, you hollow it out, and you make a big slit in it. That allows the sound to come out. Now, it's not a true drum. It's really an idiophone because most drums are membranophones. This does not have a membrane at all. And they can make them from bamboo or wood, and they make it into a box. And the slits at the top, like I said, help make the sound come out. Now, if you make them in different sizes, you get different pitches. And these logs have been used for thousands of years as signal systems, a way to warn someone if there's danger coming, or the way to signal someone, and then for merely musical pleasure as well in an accompanying way. Let's look at 2 African membranophones. There are hundreds, but I picked 2 of the most famous. And of course, the membranophone is a tube covered by a skin or membrane. The first is the djembe. Now it's goblet shaped and traditionally carved from one piece of African hardwood and then topped with an animal skin as a drum head. And you notice that it's all tied down with tension with that ring on the top. The goblet shape helps it retain that tension. And some say the name djembe came from the Bamana in Mali, who said Ankeje, Ankeje, to call their people together. And as the saying translates, as everyone gather together. So when they say Ankeje, Ankeje, that means everyone come together. J means gather, and Be means everyone. So djembe, djembe, everyone come together, which gave the drum uses in these calls to order its name. And there's a wonderful short video. And I should say now, most of the videos are 1.5, 2 minutes long. So you'll see a lot of them, but it's not hours of watching. Then, one of my all-time favorites is the talking drum. Now, this drum is amazing. It's an hourglass-shaped drum. You can see that hourglass shape. And the pitch can be regulated to mimic the tone and prosody of human speech. So prosody means like the word order and the word choices. So if the language went something like do, yi, o, do, yo, di, you can actually squeeze that drum. And if you squeeze those chords in the middle, it makes the drum go higher or lower. And in the hands of a skilled individual, they literally can make it talk. It's fantastic. So it's connected by the two drum heads and by a leather tension cord. And it allows the player to change the pitch, like I mentioned, just by squeezing them with their arm and body. You'll be able to see this demonstrated very well on the videos. And it almost sounds like a human humming. I picked one metallophone. There are many different kinds of bells used, but this one is the most famous. It's called the agogo bell or the Yoruba bell. And it may be the oldest samba instrument in the world and was based on West African Yoruba single or double bells. There's a wonderful demonstration on one of the videos of this, and I have a modern version of it in the music room. And we'll demonstrate that on camera as well. The use of it is that they have one has a high pitch, one has a low pitch, and one can get really amazing rhythms. Then you're going to see in a video some big ones, and you see these amazing musicians hit 3 different parts of it, the two of them, and make incredible rhythms together. It's absolutely fantastic and used throughout the Caribbean in North and South America. Now we use it when we speak of Latin music. We're really talking about the origins of West Africa. This is one of the old ones. And we'll talk about 4 African aerophones. Well, obviously the conch, also known as the seashell horn or shell trumpet, it's a wind instrument. It's made from a conch. And the rule is that you cut, when you make this, to make this like a trumpet, you cut only the first 3 layers off the end of this, no more. And then you play it like you would a trumpet. And then one can hold on to the side of it and make different kinds of sounds. And there's a demonstration of that on the videos as well. Flutes. Flutes are a hollow tube of bone or wood or reed, and you blow across a tone hole. And I'll demonstrate some really cool techniques with my flute that have African origins. And then you change the pitch by the finger holes. As you push more fingers down, it changes the length of the air. And as you go with more fingers, it gets lower, less it goes higher, because the air column changes. And then when that air column changes, the pitch changes with it. So flutes are ancient African origin. The next thing is a kakati, and this is an ancient long metal trumpet with a low pitch. We even see many of these instruments on engravings in Egypt throughout the full region of the Nile, on wall paintings and on a huge series of carvings that show these instruments, usually in delineating some kind of ceremony or parade or ritual. And these are kind of haunting sounding. They sound very low, and this gives us insight into what the ancient world sounded like with music. Then we have the algaita. Now this is the forerunner of the modern shawm, which is a Middle Eastern instrument, and the oboe. And it takes two reeds put together like this, they touch each other, and then one puts both of them in their mouth, and they're slightly curved, so it creates a hole, and you blow into it, and the reeds help produce a very, very interesting sound. It's kind of a piercing sound. You'll notice this on the video, but highly recognizable in the Middle East especially, but throughout Africa. So your assignment is simply this. Listening and watching assignment, you'll see that of the short YouTube videos. The links are all listed in Canvas. And then you're going to write an essay on African music. It's kind of a test covering specific questions. And the link to that Google Doc is also on Canvas. So just answer each question. They're each a paragraph. And they'll relate to all the videos and this lecture. So I'll see you in class. Thank you.